Welcome to the Monday, December 19th, 2022 school board meetings. We're glad that you joined us tonight. Please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no amendments to the agenda tonight. At this point, we will adopt the agenda. On behalf of my fellow board members, at this time, I would like to invite and encourage members of the audience to sign up regarding district issues. Please begin by stating your name. You will be limited to 3 minutes. This is your 3 minutes. The clock will not be stopped until your 3 minutes are completed. We will not be acting on the issue tonight unless they are part of the agenda. If you have a question, we refer you to the proper person. Consent agenda items, 4.1 minutes, 4.2 fundraisers, 4.3 2023-2024 student calendar, 4.4 track and field schedule. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion by Mr. Carroll, second. Second by Ms. Hagan. Any discussion or questions? By a show of hands, all in favor? Oppose? Becky, 5-0. Items for individual consideration. 5.1, report on audit of internal accounts. Mrs. Joseph.
Okay, Madam Chair, Mr. Mark Bouchard, CPA, is going to give you a report on all the internal accounts.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good
I'm going to
evening.
pass around a handout that generally is a little bit shorter than tonight, but it's shorter than the 5 sets of financials that you got there. So I'll pass these around. And each one.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's 2 there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is this on? It is, okay. Sent to you electronically, I believe, was a set of the financial statements, which is includes the report, includes all the detail of every club and activity fund of each of the schools, the dollar amount, and our disclosures in there, and any findings, and also the school's response to those findings. So you've got those, and if you've got any questions, feel free to stop me as I go through the presentation. The handout that I gave you is a little bit of a summarized version for all 5 schools, and I want to just kind of quickly go through that, particularly the findings, because that seems to be what most everybody is interested in the most. And if you've got any questions, feel free to stop me. So we conducted our audit, which ended, well, for the period ending June 30th, 2022. And this was in accordance with government auditing standards, which is a set of standards a little higher than regular, generally accepted auditing standards, because government has another layer of protection on there for you. We incurred 302 hours for this audit, which is up from last year. We had 268 last year, and we had some more complications this year. And usually when there's any complications with any of the schools, any weaknesses in internal controls, it takes us longer because we have to either increase our testing or the documentation's not there and we have to use some alternative procedures. So we did have an increase in hours. On each of the schools, we issued an unmodified opinion, and what that is a clean opinion. So we didn't find anything significant enough for us to issue an adverse opinion. So I want to mention that. And also, just to let you know, we encountered no significant difficulties or disagreements with any management at the schools or within the district office. If you flip to page 2, the very top there's a summary of the total cash receipts for each of the schools. And, as you can see, and this is consistent with prior years, the high school by far has the highest amount of receipts involved. In fact, there's 52 different club or activity funds of this school. And the smallest would be Greenville, and they have 12 different funds. But sometimes those 12 can also have quite a bit of transactions, a lot of small things. And sometimes the smaller number of transactions, we have to increase our testing percentages. So some of these smaller schools, we may be testing 80% of the transactions, whereas a larger entity, we can look at, based on our formulas that we use to select or randomly select different transactions. As a percentage, we probably have less at the high school than, let's say, Greenville or even Pinetta. Now, and I'm going to go through these findings in just a minute, but overall, if you look down where it says total number of findings, we had 4 at the high school, 1 at the Central, 1 at Pinetta, 3 at Pinetta, 1 at Greenville, 1 at Lee. And this is an increase over, if you look two lines down there, 2021 number of findings, you can see that we did have some increases, particularly for Pinetta. Now, our findings are broken down into different categories. We'll say it this way, the worst one, the strongest one, is a material weakness, and that's a deficiency, or maybe even a combination of different deficiencies within their internal controls, that there's a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement could take place and we wouldn't catch it. So, and we wouldn't catch it or it wouldn't be detected by the internal controls within each of the schools. Either not catch it, meaning not detected, or maybe even prevented or corrected on its own. So the next level is a significant deficiency, and that's a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control that's less severe than a material weakness. But yet it's strong enough that we need to communicate that. And what we've got here, these are all significant deficiencies. They're strong enough to be able to warrant the communication with the board. And then there's also another category that can be included in those two, and that is an instance of non-compliance. And that's basically a finding that's consisted of a breach of a very specific law, within the state of Florida, or regulation, or contract, or grant agreement, okay? And these findings, like I said, are also included in these other findings. Let's first flip to the third page. We'll begin with the high school. And the first finding that we have is funds dispersed were not properly supported. And what I mean by that is there wasn't proper documentation to support the disbursement of that fund. In other words, like a receipt, or maybe not having a check requisition or an invoice or something like that. In this case, and let me back up just a minute. Each of these findings doesn't mean that they're just one instance of that finding. In some cases, there could be 6 or 8 or 10 of the same type of thing. We'll group it into one finding, okay? So this particular item, there were 3 instances that, based on our testing at the high school, that did not have any kind of supporting documentation. In one of these was a debit card transaction. So you have the transaction, but there's no receipt or anything. So, and we noted one instance where the check was written for an amount higher than the check requisition amount. And so it was kind of a trivial amount, but still, it wasn't consistent. So each of these findings, we state the condition, what we found, and the criteria of why they're considered a finding. In other words, are they in violation of the Red Book or violation of the school board policy or what it is. And then we state usually a cause where basically the cause would be what could happen because of the result of this finding. Then the school actually issues not a conclusion, but a response to each of those findings. You know, like they could, and it's up to their wording. So in your audit report, that's the school's response. That's not our response. That response could be, well, this is what happened, or this is what we're going to do to correct it in the future. And sometimes those responses really can only be just a few sentences. But the way we break these findings down is if they're a repeat from the prior year, it's clearly stated in a different category in the findings. So what the state Auditor General's office does is they look at these, and each of these findings need to be corrected, you know, by the following year. Sometimes they'll let it go another year, but the third year, they kind of take issue at that. So, and particularly if, let's say, we find findings that they're very repetitive, and yet we're issuing our report well after year end, well, we're already into the next school year. So it's important for them to, each of the schools, to address these as soon as possible. The second finding for the high school was that an employee collected and used funds outside of the school oversight. In the course of our discussions with the district, we became aware that an employee of the school had created a checking account in the employee's personal name, but apparently for school purposes. The employee collected checks which were made either payable to the school directly or in some shape, form, or fashion. This is for the high school, could have been to MCHS or some variation, you know, of the school. And in some cases, the checks could have even been made payable to the individual, but it was deposited in this particular account that was for school purposes. Let's see, the known amount that was collected was $18,165, of which a little over $3,500 was not used in accordance to district policy. In other words, district policy states that all the organizations of the school or organizations operating in the name of the school that obtain money from the public shall be accountable to the board. They have to be authorized by the board. And also, they need to be in accordance with board policy. In other words, supporting the documentation. If checks were written out, there should be receipts and documents for that. So the school discovered this amount in January of 2022, had the employee close the account and also discipline the employee. The employee did not use receipts and check requisitions for the use of the funds, as I stated. So of course, under here, indicating as the cause, an employee of the school is able to use their position to collect funds and deposit funds in an unauthorized account. The school was unaware of the additional funds being collected and thus could not ensure the funds were being used for their intended purpose. Controls were disregarded by the school employee. In fact, most any of these that are written up is generally where an employee has disregarded the school's internal control policies. The next finding
Let me stop you right there.
Yes.
Okay, I want to inform the board, since we have new school board members, this is the first time that this has come before the board. Because I mean, this is what the normal procedure right here. You do your audit, it takes the year, but this is actually the first time we've seen anything in writing about this particular incident. And it violates so many different things that should happen, you know, in schools. And anyone that's been in a school system for any length of time, now, I mean, we might forgive the teacher who just started the first day of school, realize that you do not open an account and put checks made out to the school in your account. That is totally, totally unacceptable. Now, I'm not sure of the exact repercussions of this, but this bothers me. I think the word that comes to my mind is trust. These people trusted this person, and that trust was broken. And now, I think some people would be hesitant to make out checks, knowing, where's the money going? Where's the $3,500 here, almost $3,600? So I don't know how the board feels about this, but I feel like the trust has been broken, and it's this is serious.
Absolutely.
Mrs. Gibson, you're saying that this is the first time it has been brought before the board, but as the board, did you all know of these things?
It was never brought before the board.
Were you
We've
informed?
heard talk.
Did the superintendent inform you?
Yes, we've heard talk
Okay,
about it.
that's enough for me. You
Okay.
were informed?
We were informed.
Okay.
But we were not acted upon because it was not brought before the board.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
And just to add one bit of information, the reference to the 3,566, like I said, those were funds spent for something other than the intended purpose. So, for just miscellaneous different things, so. Any other questions on that?
Was that personal?
Not aware of whether it was personal or relative to the school business.
Okay,
No way of knowing because there wasn't documentation.
okay.
So that's why I'm
Thank you.
reporting that amount.
Okay, was there checks written from that money?
Usually, I believe it was debit cards used.
Debit cards, okay. All right, and I'd like to
And
ask.
with a debit card, you can look at the vendor. You can see who it is, the date and everything.
Right, okay.
Any other questions?
No,
I believe that the account was opened by someone
an individual.
from the Booster Club for this particular person. And this particular person had the account open in his name. And then people would deposit money in that account for him to use because he was the football coach. He was.
Oh, I keep hearing this person and that person. Does that person have a name?
Mike Coe,
Mike Cole?
right.
Thank you. Because in any papers with a paper trail of this significance, a name should be listed. Now, it would be listed in our school board minutes and whatever, but it's not listed as audit. And everybody's saying this person, that person. I was not on the board, but of course, I've heard it from day one, all through the community. The whole community has. So I'm just letting everybody say what they got to say. If anybody got to say something, then I say what I got to say. That's stealing.
And let me add one other thing. Relative to deposits that went into the account, some were actually checks written and deposited in the account, and some were through basically
Get them or whatever.
yeah, that type of
Cash
so somebody could make a direct contribution to it.
So my question is, does the board have the ability to pursue this?
And any which way you choose. My job is to find it and report it.
Okay.
And then it's up to the board to do whatever you feel like is appropriate under
Will
the
you please list this
circumstances.
person's name in the report? Can we get a report with the person's name listed?
We, as auditors, we don't do that.
Oh, you don't do it?
No.
Okay, thank you.
In any of these findings, we don't list the
Individual?
schools. Yeah,
Okay.
we just never have, never do, and it's just not customary. If I
But
needed
it's not
to,
illegal.
what's that?
It's not illegal, just not customary.
I'll say it's not appropriate. If y'all would like something from me, I could put it. you
No,
know,
I'm fine.
Yeah, but that's why. So we, as auditors, we present straight facts, and then if y'all have additional questions, we can certainly address
I
those.
got you.
But any of these findings, we don't list the school bookkeeper, their name and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to let the board know that I've received phone calls regarding this, and very concerned phone calls.
Absolutely.
A million.
And they've had questions, they want to know thinks they're so powerful to do this, which I've never, in my years in education, I've never heard of anything like this, but I'm sure it exists. And they're concerned about the bank, they're concerned about the tellers, they're saying, where's the money? In other words, they have a lot of questions about it. And it'll be up to the pleasure of the board what they want to do about it.
Each time I got a phone call, I wrote some stuff down, notes from the calls, and I've got it all documented here, all those calls. And then you can't go in Winn-Dixon shop now that it has come, and I'm accosted on the street and everything. Seems as though everybody wants to tell me everything, but I'm gonna let the other school board members do what they need to do. But nobody should be so powerful as to think that they can do things like this. I'm really, at a loss of words for right now for it. So any other school board members, do your thing.
In any of these findings that I present, there's checks and balances. I mean, that's what internal controls are. They're there to catch things, whether it's done deliberately or intentionally or unintentionally, before it goes too far or before it becomes material. In the case of this situation, when you go outside of the realm of the whole system and set up something personally, it is much more difficult to catch.
That's right.
It certainly is. Not saying it can't be, but I see it happen in churches,
Right.
schools, and
Absolutely.
everything. It does.
My
So,
thoughts are, is this just the first time this was caught?
Right.
Yes.
I mean,
It makes you question how much has been done previously that hasn't been caught.
Right.
And that has slipped through the system.
And that's
You
why
know.
I'm saying we need policy on this.
Our
There's no policy. The response was not good enough for me. There was
Well-
no check and balance with that response.
There is a policy.
And what I'm saying
But-
is the repercussion of someone who would do this. It's in our policy. And Ms. Attorney, do we have something in our policy about this?
well, there's
Or
a
do
staff
we have a
discipline.
policy on it?
We have a staff discipline policy. I mean, I looked it up. It's 3139.01.
Wait a minute, let me
It's
hear
our
from the attorney, please.
Okay.
That's the legal word.
You do have, I think it's very plain that when you collect money on behalf of the district or on behalf of a school, that money has to be deposited in that school's internal accounts. I think that's very plain. I think it's hard for me to imagine that someone believed that they could set up an account in their personal name on behalf of the school using their personal social security number and all of that and think that was appropriate. That's very difficult for me to believe someone could do that. Now, the issue you've got though with any discipline you might wish to mete out to this employee is the employee no longer works for the district. So you don't have the opportunity to discipline them or fire them or anything else. They've already left. The issue with failing to comply with the district's policy would be an appropriate subject to do employee discipline on. But like I said, you don't really have that option now. Now, as far as the actual money goes, the money, had it been properly collected and properly deposited into the school's internal account, it would be spent on things that are, were appropriate for that activity. Now, I think what Mr. Boucher is saying here is there was $18,165 collected, and then $3,566 of the $18,165 was not used in accordance with district policy. So the rest of the $18,165 looks like it was or
Yes,
likely
and
used.
also used for the intended purpose.
Right. So, the question is, with the, not the 3,566, but the other part, the remaining part, I don't know that you've got any good cause of action to get that money back. It looks like it was spent probably how it should have been. Now, the $3,566, I think what Mr. Boucher is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not that we know it was not spent appropriately, but we don't know that it was spent appropriately, right?
That's right.
So you got a debit card transaction that says something was bought at store X. Well, we don't know that that wasn't appropriate, but we can't show that it was, right? So I think if you wanted to try to recover that $3,566, the first thing you would do is you'd contact this employee and ask them, do they have some explanation for these expenditures and all of that. I think that would be required before you could file a lawsuit or any of that kind of stuff. Now, but yes, I think were the employee still here, I think it's very difficult to envision a scenario where they legitimately thought that was an appropriate thing to do. I think that's very difficult to envision. Not saying it's impossible, but it's difficult for me to envision someone thinking they had the right to open up an account for the school district or the high school in general. So did that help at all?
Yes, sir,
But
thank you.
let me ask you something. I thought the purpose, of course, I don't know what the purpose really was for the rings. Now, evidently, this $3,566 was not used for rings.
I think the point of the rings was that's where it was caught.
Yes.
Because
yeah.
when they went to buy the rings, they said, well, we've got this amount of money, we need this amount extra. And so whoever looked at it went, well, wait a minute, where'd you get the first part of this money? We haven't cut you a check for that. And that's where everything kind of was discovered. I don't think the whole $18,165 was spent on the rings, but I don't know that.
That's correct, it is not.
Yeah.
Out of the 18,000 some odd dollars, 18,165, 14,599 was paid on deposits for the championship rings.
Right.
How many rings did we order?
An excessive amount.
Yeah, dang, that's
They're expensive.
Yeah.
And that didn't
They're
cover them.
expensive for $70 each.
Oh, they're expensive.
Okay, somebody gave me some wrong information, who called me, said they were big old ugly rings for $70 each.
Well, and that 14,000 didn't cover the whole cost of the ring. I mean, that was what they paid out of this fund, and they still needed some money to cover the rest of it. So anyway, getting back to my point, I don't think the 3566, I don't think it has conclusively been shown yet that 3566 was not spent on things it should have been spent on. We just don't know what it was spent on. So if you wanted to pursue it, you need to, that's our first step, would be to reach out to the employee if you care to do that. But one of the things that the district always has to be conscious of, just like any small business or anything else that's in this kind of position, you would be surprised how many clients I have that are businesses where people have stolen money, bookkeepers or whoever have stolen money. How many attorney hours do you want to spend pursuing $3,566, right? That's the economics that you guys have to weigh out, and you may feel it is appropriate and want to pursue it, and you may feel not. I think you're justified in either way. And I'm sure Mr. Boucher has experience with businesses where people have stolen money.
A lot.
And you have to make those kind of decisions as far as what you want to do.
And that's why you have internal controls, and that's why
Exactly.
the internal controls have to be enforced. That's why you have an audit. Because if they're not being enforced at each of the schools, they need to be aware of it, and you need to be able to address it as a board.
Sir, your audit would not have shown this, because this account was not one that you would have audited.
Yes and no,
you were-
we may have, because, that's probably true.
Your
because-
audit would not have
yeah,
caught that.
Yeah, it was
And
completely
it was a
off.
personal account, and so nothing connected to the school, your audit would not have caught it. Now, because that whoever the bookkeeper, whoever it comes from, was so diligent, and then they reported, they noticed discrepancies. That person is the person who caught it and then reported it.
That's correct.
So I never did see any information from the principal. Did the principal know anything about it? And all I found, the findings and whatever, the principal name is never mentioned. There's a hierarchy, chain of command. The lady should have reported it to the principal, so the principal did not know anything about this at all. No statements, no nothing from him. How did that come about?
I don't remember who called
The
it.
principal knew about it.
The principal.
He did know about it. I just didn't see anything in all these findings and responses and whatever that the principal said anything. His accountability to that, because that is that principal's school. When something is reported to him of that significance, his name.
And I think what happened in this case, it was significant, obviously stronger than these others that I'll refer to. And so therefore, the superintendent was involved. And there is a management response. And let me just read that. And this is a response from management, the superintendent, and what she has done with each of the schools. So as a result of the investigations, the superintendent met with each principal, discussed board policies that related to internal accounts, and reminded them of their obligation to oversee internal accounts. They were also told that board policies are non-negotiable. Each bookkeeper was reminded of the board policies as they related to internal accounts. In an attempt to keep this type of activity from happening again, the superintendent advised the finance director to seek out an electronic school financial depository account that could be used by each school for their internal accounts. This specifically requested that the system have the capability for the district to review the accounts at any time. The new accounting system has been put into place. The school bookkeepers received a mandatory 2 days of training on the new system. The finance and information system staff also received several days of training to oversee these accounts in the future. The superintendent met with each principal and reinforced that no bank accounts should be opened by any school or by any school employee for the purposes of depositing any money made payable for school activities without express written approval from the board. A designated person within the finance department will continue to meet regularly with school bookkeepers and will continue to randomly review internal accounting procedures in bank accounts in an effort to detect any further violations of handling public funds by school employees. So that was the response.
And that's why I was talking about the response. There's nothing in place in that response of what would happen, what can happen. These people are not taking the money. It was an outside entity that took the money. Had not this incident happened about the ring, it still would not have been caught. So what I'm saying is, we need to have policy here, saying if this should happen, the consequences of it. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Attorney?
Yes, ma'am. I think you're saying you want a specific policy that tells our employees that their job is in jeopardy if they
That's exactly what
try
I'm
to
talking
open
about.
an account.
Because all these other people being honest. There's no significant findings, just little things and, mistakes, and sometimes not just following rules, just forgetting or whatever, and just, I'm not gonna do it. But nothing is as significant as this. Nothing is addressing the consequences of if you should do this. That's all.
I'd like to ask the attorney a question. You mentioned the attorney hours and how it can, for the 3,000, 3,500. Okay, professional practice. What is that? I know that's an area where they do some investigating, and does that involve us paying them or?
No. I don't know that professional practices would get involved in this. You can certainly call them and report it to them, and they will conduct whatever investigation they wish to conduct. And there's no charge for any of that. I don't know that they usually professional practices is interested in things that apply to their teaching licenses and teaching certificates. I don't know that they're going to worry with this, but I don't know they won't either. That
Okay.
would certainly be something.
It was
to look
brought
at.
up, so I wanted to mention that to
Yeah.
you. Now, let me ask the superintendent, what were the repercussions from this? What happened? Because the public is interested in that.
Yes.
The person in question got a written reprimand in their permanent folder. And whenever he applies for a job, if that's anything out of it, we have to make a copy of that written reprimand signed by myself, himself, and the principal. And it is in his folder.
All right, did he pay any money back?
No, he did not.
Okay,
Was he asked to pay any money back?
Okay, during that time when he left, when we did it, we didn't know was any funds due back or anything because he just completed this audit.
okay.
And one of the things I will say, the superintendent and I discussed it, and that was deemed by the superintendent to be the appropriate discipline at that point. Now, termination could have been considered at the end of the year, but of course, this employee moved on before the end of the year, so that's why termination wasn't.
Well, but before we decide anything, really, we can ask for the money back.
Exactly. I mean, do you plan to request him to pay the money back, or we're
And
just?
we can go from there after we get a response from that.
Well,
Ask for the money to be
personally, I
paid
had
back.
not planned on asking him to remind it back because the books are just being audited. He left in, what was that, March, April?
March.
He left in March, and so the books were not audited by then, so I didn't know whether he had any money, did he owe any money or not then.
So now we can ask for the money to be returned.
We've got to.
Ask
Let
him
me
to
let me
pay it.
add something to that, and the attorney can address this. This was in his personal name, you know.
That was his money.
And some of the checks were made payable to him. They may have disclosed what the description was, X number of championship rings, you know, a business could have done that. And some of the deposits, we mentioned Venmo, were, actually most everything was Square, through Square. And so they did a swipe through their bank account, went right into his personal account. So that would be a legal question to address, you know, whose funds were they legally? It was obviously inappropriate, and it was raised on behalf of the school, so you got a lot of gray areas that would need to be covered. And then the question also is if a check was written to the school and was deposited into an individual's account, how did that happen? So,
Who allowed that to happen? And that's probably
Yeah.
a bank question. And that would be up to the bank to
Correct.
pursue.
Well, we may or may not get money recovered, but I'm glad it came to light. To me, it's illegal. You've used stolen funds. The bottom line, that's stealing, and it's
Correct.
taking away from the children, because that money
Absolutely.
was to go to the schools. And the way it was done it violates so many different rules that we operate by in school systems. And like I said, this is not a first-year teacher who doesn't know the rules. When you've been in the business for a while, you know the rules. I mean, and you're expected to follow them, and the rules weren't followed here, and that bothers me.
And that's what a lot of people who call me, they said it was knowingly. He knowingly did this. And I'm through with it, but the community wanted to know why his name was not called. They figured that name should be called because what did they tell me? She said, they want the name, and the community deserves to know the name. It's unfair that this has gone around the community for so long. It's unfair to the board, the superintendent, the principal of the bank, and to everybody, but not to this person. And why is this protection in place? That's some quotes that was given to me from the community.
Can you give us the exact amounts of the checks that were made out to the high school that were deposited into this account? Do you know those numbers?
yeah, I can get those numbers.
Okay.
That were made payable to the school
high
itself.
school,
Yeah,
right.
and there were
There were
written in
only
different.
two that was made directly to the high school.
That were deposited in that
It
account?
was,
Might have been a couple more, and
Okay.
but they were also some of the larger amounts. The smaller transactions were mostly Square and so forth. But, you know, a business may write a check for $1,500 or $2,500 or so. And that's how probably the dollar amount got up quite a bit, you know, and so.
But it goes back to that trust thing. In other
Exactly.
words, these people with their hard-earned money.
Absolutely.
We're not talking about millionaires here.
Absolutely.
They are in favor of the football team.
Correct.
They're, like I am a sponsor as well as many other people, but you trust that person, and the trust has just been taken away, so. But I'm glad you have another avenue for donating money coming about or.
yes, we
being-
do.
Yes, yes.
You want him to finish his report, and then Ms. Radnick will explain you what
Yes,
some
yes.
of the
I'd
measures
like-
that we
yes,
put in place.
That's fine with me.
And I'll kind of, on this particular item, I'll end with this. First of all, keep in mind, it was called. You know,
Yes, yes.
it happened, and usually you catch it after something's happened. And something like this, it boils down to a lot of trust with that employee, in communication with that employee, the policies and procedures, which I would think they should all know. But this does happen. I've seen it happen particularly with some churches, with accounts set up outside of the regular church accounts, deposits flowing through that, you know, with the most trustworthy people. You know, sometimes they're not trustworthy, obviously, if that happens. But it does happen, and it happens way far greater than y'all realize, because I see it working with my clients, so.
But, I mean, we got all these measures in place that you know, you all set it in there, but, I mean, there's nothing. I mean, if they get caught, they get fired. What if they don't, I mean, it could go on forever and ever and ever, and you're not never.
And I,
That's what
You
I was
see what I'm
saying.
saying? I
Policy.
mean, these measures that we put in place is great for people, you know, but who's to say that somebody in the Booster Club ain't gonna set up an account for another person, and then, you know, people gonna send money to that thing. Now, whether they use it for,
intended purposes or not.
intended purposes or not, I mean,
And that's
but
what
you
I'm
ain't
saying.
gonna know.
Consequences.
You will not know.
That's all I'm
Now,
saying,
if you, I mean,
consequences.
other than if you willing to take that chance and you may get caught and get fired, you know, that's the way.
But we need other consequences in policy. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
We need to do a workshop on here, have our attorney do something in policy and the other consequences of what can happen.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it's not the people who are in charge of the money. It's not the bookkeepers and the accountant people. It's not them. These people value and treasure their jobs, but it was an outside. So, you know, and that person did work for us, but there should be other consequences. Because these things are addressing the accountants and the bookkeepers, not the outside person who set up the account. Prosecution and all that stuff should be addressed in that policy that we do. And we've had a learning lesson from this.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from this is that anybody who's watching this and for the community, it's most important that you guys understand that if you are making a donation to the school, it needs to be made to the school or the district. Because at the end of the day, it seems that the consensus is that this money is made out to an individual. Our repercussions for this employee is very limited. So if you're not making the funds payable to the school, there's not a whole lot we can do. It seems to me that Ms. Joseph has done, you know, as much as she can do with what we have to work with. And at the end of the day, you put faith in man, he's bound and determined to disappoint you. So, you know, don't ever put somebody on a pedestal, you know, because you fall eventually.
The obligation rests with the public, the bank, and the school, including that individual, so.
So you all are saying that we don't need anything in policy?
No, we
Yes, we do.
I agree with that, but I'm just saying, we can't beat a dead horse here. You know, it seems like our hands are tied as far as
So
this
that's why I
situation is
said
concerned.
we need
Let's
some in
work on
policy.
how to protect ourselves moving
In the
forward.
future, from this
Yes.
point on.
Yes.
Now, everybody knows,
That-
they say we hid it. That's what they
Yeah.
said, we hid it.
Well,
Now,
no-
everybody
nothing was
knows.
hid, because it's all.
No, I'm just saying the community said we hid it because we couldn't call the name. And now
And then nobody can say that anymore.
that's exactly,
Yeah,
nobody can say
Well,
that.
the name
It's out
wasn't-
effective now.
The name wasn't withheld because of the district, it was withheld because of his policy. So, you know, it's been discussed, and, you know, I think we have a workshop on how to prevent this moving
I
forward.
think if nothing else, like Ms. Knight said, it's been put on the table.
Yes.
And so if you want to give money, take it to the schools.
Absolutely. In fact, I believe it's in the state red book, states all monies are collected by the school. They're not collected, they may be collected, I guess, by a teacher on behalf of the school. I mean, the school is the employees, but
Yep, the red book is the Bible.
Where does, so to speak, when it comes to the schools, who is the one that the buck stops with?
The principal is, person is in charge of the school.
But again, you know, I feel like we're beating a dead horse here, not to just keep saying that. At the end of the day, it appears to me that the two people that needed to have repercussions for this are no longer with us for a reason, and that speaks volumes in itself. So again, I think, you know, we finish this report and we work on how to protect ourselves moving forward.
And also we issue a draft of this report in order to get the responses from each of the schools. So our first presentation is tonight, and that's why I present to the board. So if you have questions, you ask me, and I will give you very specific answers.
So this
you.
response that you got, this was from the principal at the time?
On this one, we get a response. Sometimes it's from the principal,
Okay.
but this particular response came from the
From Mr.
superintendent
The
because this
principal is
was,
gone also.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this was from you, okay.
So this was at a higher level.
Okay.
And one last thing, the consequences that y'all keep speaking of, obviously, and the attorney can address this, there's already, well, you probably need to address some within the school district policies, but also there's consequences set up by rule of law.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's already there.
I was gonna say, our staff discipline policy states that we, follow due process based off state law. I mean, so he's no longer a staff member, but in our policy, that's what it says. That we follow state law based off of what was done. And that's already a policy.
And,
So,
let me add, I don't want to keep dragging this out. Some of the disbursements that weren't specifically for championship rings were things like the gas stations, McDonald's, different restaurants, whether it's here, Tallahassee, or other places in, different places in Florida. So was he or was he not traveling on school business? I can speculate what I think,
Right.
but we don't know that specifically, and there's no documentation for each of
Right.
those.
Right.
So I'll just leave that with y'all
It's
as
very
well.
gray right there.
Yeah, it's very gray.
It's very gray.
So, can I also ask, I know we've talked about this a lot, but we said that money was coming in from Venmo and different avenues that were, debit card use.
Square.
Okay, so this account, this $18,165, that was all in his personal account, correct?
That's correct.
So this, you have, I'm assuming, statements. What statements were provided from this account?
The bank account statements.
Okay,
correct.
so he provided these statements?
Yes.
He had to because
Okay.
that's his personal account. I could not.
Right. So that was were those statements provided from the start of the account? Or like what time period?
Once it got caught, when they were trying to do the
Right.
rings,
What I'm saying is like if this, when was
If
this
it was
account
happening
opened?
before this.
Right.
If the
When
account
was
has
this
been
account
open.
opened? How many,
To answer your question, the statement, they say the purpose of the account was to collect funds, the purpose of collecting the money. I don't know the account.
Right.
I don't know the purpose of the account.
Right.
I don't know how long the account,
Well, that's what I'm
That's
saying.
the
but the
question.
purpose of collecting was funds for the state ring.
Right.
So we got a statement from
Start
when,
from there.
From the
after
time.
championship.
Okay, so this
Okay.
amount was just from then. So that's my question is, how much money was,
But
Correct.
that was
Prior
his
to
personal
That's his
account.
personal
Right,
account, so we
right.
can't demand that.
Right.
That
All
was
we
his
can demand is
personal
what-
this is all we know about is
And
what
that
I'm
was
saying.
money given to him.
Right.
So there could have been much more money involved, but at
We
the end of
can
the
only
day.
We just
speculate.
can't demand
We
it.
can't,
Exactly.
right.
And let me further state this, at the most, like 99% of the contributions came in the month of December.
All right.
At the beginning of December, this account did exist, but there was about a little over $100 in there.
Okay. So that,
So I would say.
But how long, when did he begin his employment with the district? I mean, how long was he employed with the
I
district?
think he was in the district about 17 years.
So over 17 years, I mean, I'm not saying that is the case, but we only have receipts for
6
since
months.
6 months.
Yeah. and it's-
So, I mean, again, it's a personal account, but, it's just something to consider.
It's another thing, when there's really, a written reprimand is not a whole lot of, that's not gonna hurt him too much, I don't think. But what bothers me is when there's no punishment,
Right.
I feel like, well, I can do this again. In other
Well-
words, it's,
And maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna say it. I'm just gonna say it.
Say it.
This is what hurts me, is after this happened and after he's gone, the sabotage that has happened to our football program.
Amen.
And I don't appreciate that at all. Former employee or not. If you care about these kids, care about these kids. Whether you're in another county or another state, these kids looked up to him, and that hurts me. So I'm just gonna say that.
that
Sabotage.
trust. thing.
Absolutely.
The trust is gone. It's broken.
We just need to move on from this, because, they can.
Well, I'm done.
We
I'm
can
done.
move on
I've
from
said
this,
my
'cause
piece.
Frankie's blood pressure's getting up. We're gonna have to call
What
it on
happened
this.
was wrong. I hope that, he knows it was wrong, and that part was wrong, but And we do, like, Ms. Hagan has stated, we need to have some kind of state, if this happens, this is what's gonna happen, policy-wise.
And again, community, do not make funds payable to anybody individually.
No.
Because again, you put faith in man, you end up here.
In addition to that, someone makes a check payable to the school or the district, it is tax deductible. Make it to that individual, it's not.
Right.
For what that's worth. Okay, are ready to move on?
Yes,
Any other
Yes,
questions?
thank you for
We're
the
done.
information.
And if y'all have additional questions after tonight's meeting,
I'm through with it.
y'all know where to reach me, and I'm available. So I'm here to help y'all. And then reference to this, and along with these others that I'm going to address, the key is education to the employees, in particular the bookkeepers and the principal. In this case, would it even have been detected? You know, maybe not, but it did, because someone was keen enough to be able to see that there was an issue here.
And I want to
So-
say thank you to that
Yes.
employee. Thank you
Absolutely.
for picking up on that.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know what
Did we give
specific.
her $3,000 gift?
We tried.
The union will not allow that.
Thank you to that employee for, being on their P's and Q's and doing
Doing
their
their
job.
due diligence.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so with that said, let's move on. How about that?
Yes.
Okay,
Let's do it.
looking at page 3 at the very bottom is the third deficiency for the high school. And this involves pre-numbered tickets not being properly used for athletic events. And we've addressed this before, how important it is. Again, you can't put 100% of the trust just in that individual, because what can happen is you don't want to open the door for that individual, for the school or for that individual. So in this case, in our testing, we noted there were 6 instances where admission sales at athletic events were not supported by pre-numbered tickets, or partially, supported. And one of the 6, the ticket takers ran out of tickets.
Yes.
And another, there was a doubleheader baseball team, game. The first game, they had full accountability with the tickets. In the second, there was not. And what happens with the tickets is in fact, I have an example here. Go to page 8. Now, I know time is of the essence, I'll try to be as quick as I can. But there are different little reports that are turned in to the bookkeeper. So for instance, up on the top left, you have a report of tickets sold. There's actually the beginning and ending ticket number that's accounted for. Either you turn in money or you turn in tickets. So everything should be accounted for. And so in this case, and there's a very detailed explanation here. There were some errors all along in this, and you can read that. I'm not going to go through it all in detail. But there were just some math errors on this, everything. But there's also a report of monies collected, which is a report all the schools use. In addition to that, there's another report, not to confuse the two, there's a monies collected report, 2 different titles, kind of for the same purpose. The monies collected report just breaks it down how many 1s and 5s, and that's less relevance for us as auditors, really. We want to make sure all the funds are accounted for, not exactly how they were dispersed out. But anyway, you can read through this issue here. So if we go to page 4, the last deficiency for the high school, and this is a non-compliance issue. If you recall, there are material weaknesses, and then there's the significant deficiencies, and then there's instance of non-compliance, which are usually significant deficiencies. But in this particular one, funds were collected but not timely deposited. And the Florida Red Book dictates that funds collected, no matter what, it says you should turn in your funds and have it deposited as quickly as possible, basically. But in any event, funds collected must be deposited within 5 working days. And at one time, the school district had same-day deposit, which was really extremely difficult to achieve, particularly if you have a game that's not located right here in the city. But this particular deposit was $3,500. It was held by the office for 10 days before deposited. So the funds were accounted for, but it was in violation of the policy. So it's our job to address that and report that to you. Go down to the middle of the page, you'll see beginning on page 4.
Let me go back to the high
Yeah.
school again. Okay, as far as this parking fee,
Okay,
okay, have you zeroed in on that at all? I mean, this charging to park at the football games?
yes, to somewhat.
Okay.
I know that in any case, in any organization, that you have a volunteer at that gate or in concessions or anything, they're collecting cash, there's a lot of trust that has to be involved. But in this case, if someone comes through to park, they collect $5, they should give them a ticket. So again, it goes back to the public a little bit. You usually get a ticket in hand. If you don't get a ticket in hand, that $5 could go in somebody's pocket, and the ticket never went out the door, and there's really no way to catch it. So it boils down to trust. So it's just like if you go to a fast food restaurant. You're going through and you want a cup of water. There are some places that charge you for that cup of water, and you say, why? Well, they're counting cups because they have to account for those cups at the end of the day, so they're not giving all the drinks away. And so it's kind of the same premise here. So you have to have someone that's trustworthy. Now, I believe I mentioned to the chairwoman, when we talked last week, that one way of getting around this would be maybe to sell annual
Parking
parking
passes.
passes.
I've mentioned
Now,
that.
but if you've got other people that don't buy one, then you do have that, but hopefully, maybe the annual parking passes, particularly if they're sold at a discount, that may account for 80% of the funds. It would substantially reduce it. And each of those parking passes could be pre-numbered, just like a ticket, and they're accounted for when they're sold. And that would help a lot. And then anything else that's residual coming at the gate, basically, hopefully would be more immaterial. Again, you have to have accountability with these tickets, ticket numbers that are issued, all that. But all you can do is have all the procedures in place to try to prevent it or reduce it. And if it doesn't, hopefully it'll get detected somewhere along the line.
I think it's important to have procedures because to protect that person, which we know is honest, but someone else could say, there was at least 500 cars that came in, where's the money? See, that puts them on the spot. So I like your ideas, and maybe, we don't know if this will happen in the future or not.
I know Madison's a Title I school, the poorest of the poorest, and why should we be collecting money for these people to come in and see their children play?
And another alternative to that is not to charge for parking and charge a little bit more for the ticket. If it's a certain amount of revenue limit and it's all taken care of and there's full accountability there.
Eliminates
So that could be.
The difference with the reason they can't do that is the FHSAA governs the
Dictates
tickets.
the
They don't govern the parking, and that's why a lot of schools are starting to charge for parking, because that's outside of the FHSAA rules.
Okay. Coming on down to Lee Elementary, the bottom of page 4. There was a significant deficiency, and I've got an example of it, and funds were dispersed for an amount greater than supported by receipts. So if you go to page 9, this is written to the individual that's on the check requisition. You see that? There were $75.30 worth of actual receipts that were very clear and all. There were some other issues, such as a receipt from Dollar General. $100 in cash was presented. The total purchase was $20, but the reimbursement amount was $100. Looking to the left, there's a Sam's Club receipt, and included in that receipt is the membership fee of $45. That $45 was reimbursed to the employee. So is that membership in the employee's personal name, or is the membership in the school's name? I don't know that. And then in addition to that, well, and the top right-hand corner kind of explains this a little bit more, basically what I've covered. So, and again, this should have been stopped with the bookkeeper. Very, very clearly, whether it was, let's just assume errors, not intentional, but then also the employee received funds. That sometimes you may get extra change at the grocery checkout, you don't pay attention to it. But sometimes there are people that are aware of that and they don't say you made a mistake. So, turning to page 5, Greenville Elementary. For a number of years, we had the most problems with Greenville. This year we had more problems, a significant number of problems with Pinetta. Greenville, there was a non-compliance issue which was significant. The bank reconciliations were not performed timely and correctly. There were some errors in the bank reconciliation. The bank reconciliations are very much a key to the checks and balances of these cash accounts. And those bank reconciliations are supposed to be signed by the bookkeeper and also the principal as oversight. So that's important. And quite often in the past, we've had cases where the principal, the bank reconciliation could have been done on, let's say, the 25th of the month. The principal signed it off on the 23rd. That's the date. So, there was something definitely askew there. But you see issues like that. But that principal is responsible for overseeing the bookkeeper. That person is in charge of that school relative to finances. And so there's quite a few checks and balances. Not only the bank reconciliations, but as a minute I'll show you, dual signatures on checks. So any disbursements. Again, if there's cash coming in the case of the high school, outside, that's very difficult to detect. So coming down to Pinetta, there was a significant deficiency, which is a non-compliance issue, a check signed by only one signer, and there's an example there. It's just pretty straightforward. One individual signed it. That bookkeeper is required to get the principal's signature on there. So, and of course, in each of these, I've discussed the criteria. In this particular one, the Florida Department of Education, the Red Book, there's a very specific chapter, a specific section that addresses this. All checks must be signed with 2 signatures as prescribed by the principal, if not prescribed by district school board policy. So, the bottom one there, moving on, the monies collected reports and pre-numbered receipts were not used. We noted pre-numbered receipts were not used by the school. That's a significant, very significant. In fact, we debated on whether that would be a material weakness. But it's important to have those receipts because, now of course, there's all stages along the way of collections of money. There's different fingers in those funds. So if a school teacher, let's say the student brings it in, okay, turns it into the teacher or to the person overseeing the club or whatever, it's important that everything's accounted for to the bookkeeper. There's a report that's signed both by the teacher and also by the bookkeeper that those monies have been accounted for. Could something leak out in the process? It certainly could if there's cash involved. But in this case, there were no pre-numbered receipts. That's required. Let's see. There, I think, there were, well, I say no receipts. There were a few transactions that pre-numbered receipts were used. So the bookkeeper was aware that did exist. Okay. Otherwise, there'd be none. But in that case, the pre-printed number did not match the number used to record the transaction in the school software. So, then also, of the transactions that included a monies collected report, in most cases, the monies collected report was not included. 4 were not signed by anyone. So it doesn't do any good to have a monies collected report and it's just recorded there's no accountability. So that's important. And again, this is in violation of the Red Book, and that's stated there. Coming down to the last one, support for disbursements not retained in the file. In our testing, and again, we don't and can't, or we could, but it's not cost effective for us to test 100% of the transactions. So we go through random number generator tables and randomly select transactions. But in these smaller schools, it's a very high percentage. But we noted there were 8 disbursements where supporting documentation in the form of either, receipts or invoices or check requisitions were not provided at all. So, and that's a direct violation of the school district policies. So that's important that there's receipts for that, for those disbursements. So, with that said, I've had some general recommendations I've gone through, but on page 7, there's a couple of recommendations here because and I'll go back to Pinetta just a minute. Pinetta, as I mentioned previously to the superintendent, it seems like every year, not every year, but every few years, there's a school that has some significant issues, and as a result, we probably incurred 40% of our time on Pinetta because of the lack of documentation. We have to use alternative procedures and all to try to do that. But the area of most concern continues to be, disbursements. Issues in this area included checks missing dual signatures or funds dispersed without proper support and lack of competitive bidding process if required. And also we mentioned the athletic event ticket sales. They kind of rarely reconcile, and that's important, that bookkeeper, to reconcile those ticket sales with the money and signatures. Everybody's accountable.
Okay, so I have a question on that one. So as somebody who works every athletic event pretty much in the community, I'm at these ticket booths and I run concessions. And so the requisition, or reconciling that box at the end of the night is sometimes easier said than done.
Right.
Because a lot of people are going to come through and you're going to do one ticket, but they're going to throw you $20 and say donation to the school.
Right.
So the checks and balances are never, with those ticket sales, there's always an overage. And,
Because they're coming through so fast.
so
I've had
in
that case.
in defense,
Yeah.
sometimes that's a little bit more, it's easier said than done.
That's absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, I had a situation with a restaurant owner, if you want to call it a restaurant, a cafeteria owner in a large manufacturing facility.
Mm-hmm.
And at lunchtime, those people came through so quick, all they could do, they knew what they were buying and how much it was, and they put the money on the register and kept going. Well, there was an issue with theft there that eventually came about because there was the accountability. And so we stressed to the client, whatever it takes, slow the people down if you want accountability, otherwise you're on the honor system. And the honor system is great, but it opens the door even
Correct.
to honest people, and that you don't want. So it's a protection for the individual and for the school, everybody involved. Any other questions?
Any questions?
I don't have a question, but this is my 3rd audit thing that I've listened to, and it just seems like it's the same issues year after year after year. So evidently what we're doing isn't working. I don't know what we're doing, but evidently it's not working. It's the same stuff. It's not, except for that one, but it's just the same stuff. No 2 signatures on a check. Depositing money when you're supposed to, that sort of thing.
As the auditor had said, though, if I'm understanding correctly, these problems will be on a reoccurring basis because employees change.
Staff turnover, correct.
And that's where
training.
the issue is. When you
Yeah.
have a consistent employee, the same school, that, they learn the system and know what to do with it. It's when there's turnover, that's where we experience the largest problem. That still doesn't alleviate the issue.
Exactly.
I mean, if you got one person, they should know
Those are
the
some
rules
of
and
the
policies. But, like, for instance, we had an issue with Greenville many years ago, several years in a row. That person was moved. We really don't have many problems with that that person
Exactly.
anymore just because of the experience. But for instance, Pinetta, I believe there was more than one turnover in one
Yes.
year, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And
But the
that,
lady in Greenville, we finally got her right. She's left the district.
yeah. And it just,
So
it's
they'll be
like,
back next year.
so as soon as you feel like you've got ahead, here it comes. But I also will state one thing, this year was by far more, we found issues than in years past. Not only are there more findings, but there's more instances of those findings, a lot more. And I would say probably, just throw out a percentage, I could easily say it's probably 30 to 40% more issues. And it's just primarily as a result of the employee turnover, I would think.
Can I ask this, when we hire a new employee in one of those roles, what type of training do they go through?
When he finished, Ms. Raynick is gonna, speak to that.
She's making
Okay.
They
changes
do
there.
get these trainings, but just learn on the job.
We're going to team tag.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you.
And y'all do know how to reach me, so
Thank
feel
you.
free to reach out.
Thank you, sir.
Okay?
Thank you very much, Mr. Boucher. We appreciate you coming. Is there a motion to approve the audit of internal accounts?
Madam Chair, I move to accept the audit findings.
We have a motion by Ms. Knight, second.
I second.
Second by Ms. Thompson. Any,
Was this just a draft, Mark, or is this the
No,
final?
that's fine.
This is fine, okay.
We usually send out a draft until we receive certain.
Okay, so we have the hard, okay, because that's what we have, okay.
I'm sorry,
it's okay.
No problem.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Finish with the vote.
No,
The
I'm,
district has to issue us a management representation letter, which has
They won't
several
put it on
pages
my
of
meeting
very,
like that.
if you want to almost say legal statements involved.
Yes, sir.
Once we receive that, because the accountability for the statements actually rests with the school board. We're auditors, they're not our statements.
Right.
Okay?
okay. Any discussion or questions, concerns? Okay,
We addressed them.
by a show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? Becky, 5-0. 5.2, personnel change.
You want Ms. Raynick to discuss that now? since
Would
it's
you
on-
like to come up now and do that? It's just fine with me. Well, you're kind of piggybacking, so.
When we first started discovering some of these issues in the book.
Well, would you come to the podium, please? Yeah. We want to respect our public.
Good evening.
Good evening.
In response to the request to talk about what we have done and put in place for the bookkeeping systems, when we started discovering some of these issues in the bookkeeping statements and in the internal accounts, the superintendent reached out and said, we have to come up with a system that is going to absolutely help us. You can, as Mr. Boucher says, you cannot 100% guarantee there aren't going to be any failures in the system or any excuses, but one that will help us much better trying to maintain accountability at the school level and the district oversight of the accountability at the school level. Because the internal accounts are, by policy, under the supervision of the principal, and the superintendent then has tasked the finance department to oversight the monthly accounts. And so what we did was we contracted with this company called KEV, K-E-V. And KEV has a system of school internal accounting system. And the first thing we did in finance was go through about 5 days of training on this system so that we could know it inside out and backwards. Some of the things that Mr. Boucher talked about, not reconciling on time, we're going to be able to catch that. Books not reconciling at all, it's going to trigger a message that comes to us. It's going to tell us that it's not reconciling, so reach out to the school and find out what's happening. We did already have found a couple of things, like Mr. Boucher said, a lot of it goes back to employee turnover, and a lot of it goes to employee training. So we have actually done 2 mandatory days of bookkeeper training. Then we have brought the bookkeepers into conference calls with the accounts payable person and the assistant director, so that they can then hash out and network about what they're going to do and how they can help each other and how we can all help each other make these things right. Since then, one of the bookkeepers left, so then we contracted with the company to provide specific training for the brand-new bookkeeper so that that person could be brought up to speed without falling behind from where the other bookkeepers are. We've also implemented a system where we can take money with a credit card machine. We call it a Clover device. We're training right now the bookkeepers. We have some more training in January. We have not turned those over to the bookkeepers yet because we don't want to turn them over until we've been trained. And that will allow them to take credit card payments through the Clover device, as you will. Now, we have not reached out to take it to the football stadiums yet.
That was my question.
I know it was going to be a
ready.
question. We get a question in, and Mr. Goyette and the finance department have had lots of conversation about that. There's a lot more things that have to be in place before we can roll it down to the football stadiums. But our intent right now is to make sure that eventually it gets there. And money that's collected in any form, we're encouraging credit cards. As you know, a lot of people pay with their debit card. So we're encouraging payments by credit card, and then they'll be able to scan it into the Clover device. It will go directly into their bank account to the particular organization that money is supposed to go to. So like Mr. Buscher says, the high school has about 50 different accounts in their internal
Convenience,
account.
we will be able to accept online payments, so you can stay
Right.
home and pay. So having to go to the school will not be an issue anymore. You can pay from home wherever you are.
Yes. And it's going to be recording everything, so we can go back and we can check on this. And we are right now, we're sending out emails to the bookkeepers every month saying your report is due, where's your reconciliation? So we're following up with that. And we're also catching a few things, like we had one principal that was purchasing some things on behalf of the school, then coming back and getting reimbursed and then signing her own check, because they had to have two signatures. So the superintendent put in place that two people at the district office will now have the right to sign in place of that second person, or in place of one of the people if it involves them getting a personal check. So we are putting things in place for it. We're not there yet, as they say at Madison Central, but we're on our way. So
Well, thank you very much for that information. I feel good about that. Now, what about the old-fashioned people like me who like to write a check still?
you can still write a check.
Okay.
And we'll still have the pre-numbered receipts
Yeah.
and do what we're supposed to do
Okay.
with that. We're encouraging some of us that don't like to use debit cards, and I'm pointing to myself too, we're encouraging them to try and use the credit cards.
Right.
But we're not going to eliminate that for sure. We never will.
And we're still receiving cash.
We are still receiving
You'll receive
cash.
cash.
And the superintendent also asked the system, and we talked to the contractor, to set up a way where if somebody wanted to donate money to the district, they could donate it through the use of this online credit card system. It would go directly into the district's main account, and then we would reconcile that account and get the money to where it's supposed to go.
Disperse it accordingly.
So it's, again, not 100%, but we're on our way.
Thank you very much for the information. 5.2, personnel changes. Mr. Killingsworth?
Good evening. Tonight we have one instructional person that we would like to recommend. That's Mr. Sneed for the high school for math. One non-instructional, Mr. Jones with food service at the high school as well. And then I have one correction on a retirement. We had at last board meeting, we had Ms. Welch. That was at 12, basically the end of December. The correction for that, this past week was her last day that she's actually working. However, due to time that she has, her official retirement date will be the end of January. So she has time to carry her, so we need to do that, make that correction so that we get her retirement correct. And then we have three that Jalen James and Addison for tutors that I'm asking, excuse me, y'all's approval for.
I move to approve.
Is there a motion to approve the personnel changes?
I move to approve the personnel changes.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Thompson,
A second.
second by Ms. Knight. Any questions or discussion? By a show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? Becky, 5-0.
Thank you.
No, I think you've done it.
It's, okay,
Because it's on here.
it's on there.
Talking
So
about Ms. Welch, you've got the correct date on this
got
one.
the correct.
So I think
Yes,
by
yes.
approving
Approved
this,
it.
you've made the correction.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. 5.3, media specialist job description, Mr. Killingsworth.
Yes, ma'am. Going back to Heather was the media specialist at Central School. And that position, basically, with the job description that we have, that typically was a 10-month position as any other teaching position. However, due to the state's passing in the legislative of House Bill 1467, which is this, but I will give you a short rundown version of obligations that we must meet.
Thank you.
There are 10 sections on there that basically we have to reassure due to the passing of the bill in this past session, which is the parents' rights, where they're checking the books and things of that nature. And one of the things that we're proposing with this position is, currently it is a 10-month position, only dealing with Central School. Okay? What we're asking for consideration is to change this position from a 10-month to 11-month. However, it will also incorporate the 3 outlying schools because they are the same grade bands, so to speak, as Central for the most part. And that way it's kind of all the same type books, that kind of stuff, so that that person is able to go to the other schools as well and make sure these assurances are met, so that'll kind of keep us out of a little bit of trouble. With,
How will
the
this
state.
look? I mean, they're going to spend certain days going out there, or the month, the 11th month going out there, or?
During the summers,
So it'll be during this,
they can go, and if we have to, we can set up, part of that, we will have to massage and work some things out, because it is a little different. We may have to do where they go out, a day every 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, or a month, just to kind of make sure they have what they need. And part of that will be dependent upon the frequency that books will come in, when they will get them. Or they only get them during the summer? Do they get them monthly, or do they get them twice a year? Things of that nature.
now, are there, I haven't had a chance to really examine this closely, but are
Yes,
there
ma'am.
going to be certain books that are banned from the schools? Is that?
Well, yes, ma'am.
I know it's
There
not
could
our
be.
decision now.
There's, yes, this kind of goes, and give you an example. There is, the Scholastic Book Fair that always goes around to the various schools. There was, in a different county, they went, and one of the books that they had to pull, if you looked at it, I mean, it just either, I'm not sure if it had a cat or a dog on it. It was an elementary type book, but basically it had, a dog or a cat on it. Very generic name. However, the content that it was promoting was probably not favorable for what we want our children to learn. And that is kind of why you just can't look at the book and go, yeah, it's a beautiful book, throw it on the shelf. You kind of need to, let's look at it, see what the content, see what is inside the book before we purchase it or put it on the shelves. And we have had to, based on that, we've gone and pulled one,
So
just off of that one.
Can with that,
I'm not a media specialist.
right, I was gonna
Make
say,
sure you
with that
understand.
though, are we getting a list, a specific list, or is this based off someone's opinion of what's appropriate or not appropriate? Where is the guidance coming from on what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for our children?
Well, the state, of course, always loves to give us guidance
Right, right,
as
right.
to what is or
Right.
isn't appropriate. Now, we all have our opinions on that.
Right.
I would say the bulk of that would come from the state
Okay.
guidance.
So like a
And I
specific
will-
list?
They
Yeah,
are
and-
sending us a list,
Yes.
but
Okay.
it's not an all-inclusive list.
Because
Okay.
there'll be
It is
new
a
books.
living
I was
document.
gonna say, that was what I was gonna ask, is there a list that they say that we're banning this book for first grade, go pull it, that
For
was
certain
kind
content,
Right,
things of
right,
that nature.
Right. So this is gonna be up to one person to do for every school?
Well, of course, they're already set for Central, where there'll be the bulk of the year. But then the three outlying schools, yes, there's kind of the same
So-
band.
I'm looking at number 4 on this. In the meantime, it's saying temporarily restricting access or closing library media centers pending completion. So how does that?
Well,
Let me-
I
let me-
know
can I
for
stop
argument's
you?
sake,
Let's
the
get a
high school
motion
is
on this
pulled.
So we can discuss it, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's what we want to first get our motion. Is there a motion to approve the media specialist job description?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to accept the
We
media.
we have a motion by Ms. Knight.
Wait a minute, question.
We're going to get to the.
Why are we approving this before we discuss it?
Right.
See, we need
No,
to
no,
discuss this now.
We
If
haven't, we're not voting. We have to put the motion out there, and then we
Then
discuss
vote,
it, and
yes.
then we vote.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're just following our procedure. Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Knight,
To do what now?
second, to approve this. We're going to be discussing it, but first we have to put the motion out there. Second?
I second it.
We have a second by Mr. Carroll. Any questions or discussions?
Yes.
That's what we're, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
On number 4, that's what we were discussing.
Yes, ma'am.
It talks about restricting access or closing library and media centers pending completion of the school district's review of the books and materials. So, just for instance, if this person is working 11 months and Greenville is, at the end of the line are we following this?
This will have to be basically where you can say yes at the end of June.
they have a
Basically,
month?
may I make a
We need to
comment?
work that.
Yes.
Okay, we're asking for this 11 month for the media specialists to go out to these schools during the summer because they will be in charge of ordering books. Okay, the inventory of the books is on some kind of card catalog or something. So they're the only ones that will be able to put any books in. And so they're not coming all the time
Right,
because
right.
they don't order that many books.
So basically, that 11th month is for them to go to these 3 schools. and
Yes.
Service them.
And occasionally, but they won't be going out to the other schools or,
Right.
that often.
Sporadically.
Okay.
Okay, but it's basically, they go through the summer, make sure everything's in place, and if they need to order any books, they will be in charge of ordering. We won't let random people order. It will
Okay.
be the media specialist's position to do that.
Well, thank you for that information.
And we don't have a media specialist at the 3
Yes,
outlying
right.
schools. So.
Any other questions or concerns?
Well, my question is if we're pulling books, like that's where I'm saying, if we're pulling books from our existing libraries, is there a deadline that says we have to have all of these schools, all of this completed by this time in order for our children to be able to go in and check out books?
Well, that hadn't been worked out yet. We have to receive the order first.
No,
Well,
I'm saying the
and-
books we already have. They have to be gone through, correct?
They're purging those.
Okay.
But as far as us checking yeses on these, we need to be able to do that by the end of this summer. And if we don't go ahead and
Okay.
state that in place now, we're not going to get there.
Okay.
Okay, good point. Any other questions or comments? By a show of hands, all those in favor? Opposed? Becky, 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Killingsworth.
Now, that was to go to 11 month, is that correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, we
Thank
just
you.
voted for that.
Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome. 5.4, student field trips, Ms. Joseph.
Okay, Madam Chair, we have the Beta Club requesting to go on a field trip Friday, January 27th through Sunday, January 29th, and they're taking approximately, you don't take approximately, but they're planning on taking 16 students and 3 chaperones. And this is their state convention, and they will be doing a lot of competition. Ms. Griffin is a sponsor of that trip, and I'm really impressed with the next trip that's being requested. It's by the Culinary Arts Department of the high school, March 4th and 5th. And they're doing some kind of culinary competition relay team. And Miss Mona Kelly is a sponsor of that, and she's taking 8 students with 2 chaperones. And in your notes is some other literature that she has included. Okay, that's all the student trips I have.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Is there a motion to approve the student field trips?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the student field trips.
We have a motion by Ms. Hagan, second. Second by Mr. Carroll.
Yeah.
Any questions or discussion? I'm happy to hear that, especially with the culinary and everything. This might be what some students need to, the jumping off point, what I might want to do with my future after high school. By show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? Becky, 5-0. 5.5, staff travel, Ms. Joseph.
Okay, Madam Chair, field trips are being requested January 18th through 20th. Myself and the chairperson that's the FISBIT, what's that, the fall conference or winter conference, spring conference?
Winter, I think.
Winter conference.
We'll call it winter.
That's covered by FISBIT, but that's in Tampa, Orlando, one of those
Orlando.
places, Orlando. Okay, the finance forum is in Orlando, February 8th through 10th. That's the FSBA, and Katie Knight and Devin Thompson will be attending, and the approximate cost is school board member training. Okay, another thing, band director at the high school, he's wanting to attend a convention in Tampa on Wednesday, January 11th through January 14th. It says the funding source for band boosters, but if that's something he's going for, is continuing ed, that will probably, the district will help pay a portion of that. Okay, and he has some literature attached to that. And we have another fast FEPA trip in January. Ms. Howard, that's fast FEPA ECTAC, January 24th through 26th. Those are the staff trips.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Is there a motion to approve the staff travel?
I move to approve the staff travel.
We have a motion by Mr. Carroll, second.
I second.
Second by Ms. Knight. Any discussion? Questions? By a show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? Becky, 5-0. 5.6, financial report, Ms. Rainette.
I just have to say that I started my day this morning in Quincy, and I got up at 3 o'clock this morning. So if I yawn, I was here at 5 o'clock, which is typical for me. However, when I got at 8 o'clock this morning, when everybody showed up, I had 5 people in my doorway asking me why I was here at 3:15, because the Sonatrol alarm went off. Everybody pointed at me immediately. I hate to say it, I was not here at 3 o'clock this morning.
And yes, we did get calls last night at 3:15.
You're good, and thank you.
Anyhow, as we're talking about the financial report, as you know, it's a point in time. Every report is a point in time. So as of December 6th, that's what the financial report looked like. Since December 6th, last week on Thursday afternoon, we got $2.1 million in taxes. Go no taxes, we like that. So that really got us up where we needed. It's not reflected in this report, it'll be reflected in the next report. But if you look at the report, and remember, we've got 6 buckets. Okay, so the first 3 buckets are gonna be general revenue. The first bucket is going to be the general fund, which is the biggest bucket, which has the FTE and the tax money in it. We've received about $8 million in revenue this month, and we've spent about $8.6 million. So that shows you that, we're still going in the hole because of the minimum wage. So we're gonna try and, hopefully this tax thing will help bring us closer. It does show you at the bottom of that page, though, where last month it was about 11% was left in the fund balance. Because of the way the timing comes in and everything, we're now up to 15. So, but the discretionary fund balance is still at about 5.
Which I appreciate these notes that you put on here. I don't know if you want to go through it or not, but
Well,
they're very interesting to me.
As this is the year of the auditor, so we're trying to make sure that all the things are listed that could impact the fund balance. So the teacher salary increase will be paid in January, so that will be retroactive to July, so you'll see a big chunk of money coming out for that. Additional staffing for ESE, because we've had additional ESE students appear, so you're going to see additional pressure on the fund balance. We're going to talk about the food service when we get to that page.
Okay.
Recalibrated Survey 2 FTE. We do not have the final numbers yet. It is looking like we're going to be down about 40 FTE. If you think of an FTE, and I'm going to do a workshop for you later about that, but not tonight. But if you think of FTE, think of about $4,500 for one.
Yeah.
So when you're down 40, you're down quite a bit. So the increased enrollment in pre-K, we had to put another teacher on, so that's going to put some pressure on general fund. And then, of course, we just are getting through with some of the audits, so we're going to have, we're waiting for the findings to come from the department to tell us how much we're going to have to arrange to take care of there. And still trying to get out from under that workers' comp liability, but it is where it is right now. We just have to do better. So did that take care of your question?
Yes, thank you for going over that.
Okay, so the page 3 is Fund 2000. This is the debt service. The only thing we had actually happen in that fund this time was we got an interest payment. So we're building up a little more money to pay back that debt for the high school renovations. Fixed capital funds. We had about $500,000 in revenues collected. I'm sorry, did I?
No, I
okay.
remembered something Ms. Hagan told me. She was, let me ask you something, if we could stop for just 1 minute.
I'm fine.
Are you okay? Okay, all right, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Fund 3000, that's the Lego fund. The Lego fund, we collected about close to $600,000. We spent out about the same, pretty flat. That fund is looking pretty good near the end of the year. We're expecting that to stay pretty flat and not have to lose a lot of funding in there. Fund 4000, remember that now we're into the 3 buckets of federal, so this is a food service fund. We're doing a lot better this month than we were last month. We had about $1,100 in fund balance last month, and this month we've taken in a couple of increased checks for the school lunches and the breakfast, so we had brought it up to almost $74,000. So even though we know we're going to have to carry it, they're doing a good job. Ms. Wynn is doing as much as she possibly can to reach into that and help keep that fund up there. Then we have the 4200s, those are your title grants, your covered donuts, okay? Your covered donuts spent about $700,000, and we took in about $725,000, and we spent about $788. The rest is in transit. We've asked for it, it isn't here yet. Fund 4420, the only reason I put that page in there for you was because there's still some revenue in that fund. We haven't officially finished closing that out. We did close out the first part of the ESSER 4410 though. In 4430, now we're into the second round of ESSER. In the second round of ESSER, we took in 90,000, we spent 90,000, perfectly flat. In the second part of ESSER, the smaller projects, we took in 57,000, we spent 57,000. In the last two accounts, this is your American Rescue Plan money. We took in $1,200,000, almost $1,247,000, and we spent out exactly the same in the ESSER, in the ARP grant. It's the first big lump of the American Rescue Plan, third ESSER grant. And then on the last piece, the smaller pieces of ARP, we're getting an awful lot of small grants coming in. Some of the revenue has been recorded, some has not been recorded yet because we don't have the official award letter. So it doesn't show any revenue there. We've spent out about 63,000. We are requesting that back. The revenue is kind of in transit along with the expenses. On another note, we did get today a value adjustment board adjustment in the taxes. As you know, the taxes for Madison County this year were $1,042,000,000. The adjustment took it down about $3 million, almost $4 million. So it'll impact us a little bit in the money that we can collect. We're not going to get anywhere near $1 billion. That'd be nice, but it's not going to happen. But of the 5.35 million that we are taking in, it brought it down about 0.4%. So it's not going to impact us a lot. But just to be aware that the Value Adjustment Board has met, and they did some people are happy, I'm sure, because some of their taxes came down. So that's a good thing. And we did get notice from the department about, and we'll talk about this at another workshop, the amount per district that the district has spent per student. Typically, last year, for example, if you add all of the funding sources, the general fund, the special revenue funds, and any of the other sources that come in, the debt service and the capital outlay, we spent about $11,500 on each student. If you take the number of FTE and divide it into what we spent this year, in 21-22, I should say. That was in 2021. Now we're in 21-22. They just issued the report. We spent $13,222 per student. So you see our spending is coming up per student, but our students' enrollment is still falling. So we're kind of juggling those balls. Questions?
You still watering that tree?
I am still watering that tree, and I want you to know that even though I'm watering it, somebody must have plunged a hole in the ground. That water is still seeping away.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the financial report?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the financial report as presented.
We have a motion by Ms. Hagan, second.
I second.
Second by Ms. Knight. Any questions or discussion? I'd like to thank you, Ms. Rainick, for that, and I want to tell the board members I've gotten a good education from Ms. Rainick as far as meeting with her individually, and she's always willing, and there's a lot to the finances, as you will discover that. By a show of hands, oh, I thought someone said something. Becky, 5-0. Superintendent items?
Okay, one thing, at our workshop the other day, Ms. Pinkins mentioned, and all of you received an email about the master board training. What was our consensus about that? Are we gonna do that? Because Ms. Bishop needs to let her know.
Okay, we didn't get the nitty-gritty on it, but I mean, I participated.
She sent each one of us an email about it.
Tina did?
Yes, she did.
Okay. I thought it was valuable, what little we did of it, you know, I mean, a couple of years ago, we participated.
I'm okay.
I don't think anybody was on the
We
board.
had outgoing members
You might have been on the
that
board then.
threw us off. And so now, with all the new members, if we want to be master board,
Yes.
we've got to do it. If
I
not,
agree.
we don't do it.
No, I'm okay to do it.
How does the board feel about this?
I say yes.
Okay?
I think the majority, yes, it's
You
fine.
do it if you do, if you don't, you don't. We got to have so many board members
I
to
think
do it
you have
though.
to have the majority of the board.
Okay, I'll let her set it, schedule it for us. I just need to give her a response. But she did send each of us an email about it. And if you need it again, Ms. Bishop will forward it
I'm
to
gonna
you.
look it up, because, okay, we'll talk. about
Okay,
it.
one other thing that's come to my attention, the Lee Library, the property that Lee Library sits on, you need to help me out.
The county's library that's right next to the Lee School is on the property that's owned by the school district. The school district entered into a long-term lease with the county, so because the county could get the money to do the library, the school district had the land, and so that property is subject to a long-term lease with the county for $1 a year or something.
Okay, that was happened in 2007, but the situation is they want permission to build a raised flower bed on there.
So what we need to do is get with the county, make sure that doesn't interfere with what the county's doing, and I'm sure they won't hear.
That's fine. We dealt with that.
Yeah.
And it's been dealt with, so it's no significant.
It's necessary, I just need to inform you, so you
Yes.
know if you see
So it's
something
not a
going on like
significant,
that.
whatever of the structure.
No.
And so that's good.
And I think it might benefit the children.
That's
Okay,
good.
the county is in agreement with us, with them doing that.
Okay.
They just want permission
Yeah.
from the school board.
It's-
I
How does the
agree.
board feel about this?
I'm good with it.
We've come to a consensus. Be good
Okay.
for the children.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Okay, Mr. Attorney?
No, ma'am, not unless you have questions of me.
Okay, I think we've got our answers to our questions. Thank you. Ms. Knight?
I just want to take a quick moment to just thank the band directors and all of the principals and teachers and staff that put together all the amazing Christmas programs. We do appreciate them. They were all wonderful. And I just want to wish all of the faculty, staff, students, and parents just a very Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
Ms. Thompson?
I will say the same. I really enjoyed getting to participate. I didn't get to go to Central Band concert, but the high school was wonderful. The children did a wonderful job, and I want to say thank you to all the staff and students and parents, and I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas break.
Mr. Carroll?
I'm gonna tell everybody Merry Christmas. I enjoyed all the programs, and Merry Christmas to all you all.
Ms. Hagan?
As of last meeting, school board members, staff, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of attending all of our schools this past couple of weeks. We had the wonderful Christmas concert. I want to thank our band directors for the fabulous job they do. I want to thank our teachers, the support staff for what they do. It doesn't happen by accident. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication. I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy New Year. Thank you.
I move for adjournment.
We got 2 expulsions, so we need to adjourn and get it.
Yes, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move for adjournment.
Okay, if all is in consensus, we will adjourn. Thank you. Meeting